They didn't just want to kill her. They wanted to obliterate her soul, to systematically dismantle everything that made Marie Antoinette a queen, a mother, and a woman before her final breath. Her journey from the gilded halls of Versailles to a bare wooden cart paraded through the baying streets of Paris was not merely a punishment. It was a calculated, psychological assault, meticulously designed to erase her very existence. Yet, amidst months of relentless humiliation, she unearthed a formidable power in her final hours. This is the harrowing tale of how they tried to destroy Marie Antoinette. This is the story of how, even in utter degradation, she reclaimed her dignity. Forget the sparkling salons and the extravagant finery. Our story begins in the damp, reeking cell of the Conciergerie, a grim fortress aptly nicknamed the antechamber to the guillotine. By August 2, 1793, Marie Antoinette had already endured months of imprisonment, her crown and wealth long stripped away, her family her only solace. That night, a brutal separation occurred. She was torn from her children and her sister-in-law, brought here alone to a suffocating room that would become her entire world for the next 76 days. Within these cold stone walls, she was no longer the Queen of France. She was reduced to prisoner number 280. The cell itself was tiny, infested with vermin, its walls perpetually weeping with moisture. A straw mattress, barely qualifying as a bed, offered scant comfort. Privacy was a forgotten luxury. 2 guards stood watch inside her cell, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, their eyes fixed on her every movement. They observed her as she ate, as she dressed behind a flimsy screen, as she desperately tried to sleep. This wasn't merely intimidation. It was a methodical, relentless attack on her humanity, a constant, chilling reminder that the privileges of royalty were gone forever. The physical misery she endured was brutal, but it paled in comparison to the psychological torment. Just a month earlier, in the dead of night, guards had stormed her room to seize her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles. Accounts vividly describe Marie Antoinette throwing herself between her child and the men, screaming, pleading for him. Her daughter, Madame Royale, clung to her brother, weeping inconsolably. They tore him away regardless. She would never see him alive again. All she had left of him was a tiny portrait and a lock of his hair hidden away within her corset. Losing her crown was secondary. Losing her child shattered her in a way no execution ever could. Her devoted maid, Rosalie Lamorlaye, who remained by her side through these final months, would later testify that the Queen's heart truly broke only when she spoke of her children. Every other humiliation, every searing insult seemed almost tolerable when weighed against that profound grief.
By mid-October, the final, dreadful act of her ordeal began. On October 1793, Marie Antoinette was dragged before a revolutionary tribunal. This was no real trial. It was a performance meticulously scripted by her political enemies. Unlike her husband, Louis XVI, who had weeks to mount a defense, she was given less than a single day. The charges hurled against her were absurd, a grotesque tapestry woven from political accusation and depraved fantasies, lifted from the slanderous pamphlets that had haunted her for years. She stood accused of funneling vast sums of money to Austria, of plotting massacres, and of hosting decadent orgies within the hallowed halls of Versailles. Then came the most poisonous accusation of all, one designed to annihilate her very character, to destroy her as a woman and a mother: incest with her own son. They had forced young Louis Charles to sign a damning statement against her. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as Marie Antoinette absorbed this monstrous claim.
The prosecution, led by the fanatical Antoine Contin Fouquier-Tinville, seemed almost giddy with the sheer cruelty of it. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The air in the room crackled with unbearable tension. Then, slowly, she rose. Not to plead, not to beg, but to confront this ultimate monstrous lie with a presence that shocked every single person watching. Her defiance was not theatrical, it was precise, chillingly clear. She turned to the gallery, her eyes scanning the faces of the Parisian women who had once shouted for her death. In that single, bold gesture, she reminded them and the world that she was a mother first, a woman defending her honor, fierce and unyielding. The trial was over quickly. On October 16th, after barely 2 days, the all-male jury declared her guilty of high treason, death by guillotine. When asked for her last words, Marie Antoinette simply shook her head. Back in her cell, she quietly refused a final meal. Calmly, she told Rosalie, "I need nothing now, my child. It's all over for me." Then she penned a heartbreaking letter to her sister-in-law, a desperate plea that her son be forgiven for the forced testimony he had given against her. The letter was intercepted, tragically discovered only many years later. With dawn came the next wave of humiliation, each detail meticulously planned. Guards ordered her to remove the black mourning dress she had worn since Louis XVI's execution, a garment that had symbolized her status and her tragic history. In its place, they forced her into a tattered white shirt, the simple attire of a penitent, never a queen. She had to beg for a moment's privacy just to dress. When her captors callously ignored her protest, she refused to comply immediately, a small yet profound act of control in a day designed to strip her of any autonomy.
The executioner, Charles Henry Sanson, and his assistants took further steps to dehumanize her. One assistant roughly grabbed her hair, already prematurely white from months of stress, and cut it with crude scissors. It was a symbolic erasure of her femininity and her rank, and a practical, macabre preparation for the guillotine's blade. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back with ropes pulled so taut they caused real pain. Even basic bodily functions now required permission, which she had to request with forced humility. She was then led to a bare wooden cart, the kind reserved for common criminals. Unlike her husband, who had been afforded a closed carriage, she was utterly exposed to the jeers and visceral hatred of tens of thousands lining the streets. The parade to the Place de la Révolution would be more than an hour long, a public spectacle of degradation designed to utterly crush her spirit. And yet, as she sat on that hard plank, her hands tied, surrounded by a swirling storm of hostility, Marie Antoinette endured. Every jolting step, every hostile stare, every screamed insult tested her to her core, but she remained composed, fully aware that these final hours would define her far more than any trial or punishment. The Queen of France had been stripped of her crown, her family, and her magnificent palace. But in that damp cell, and on that agonizing path to the guillotine, the seeds of her final unbroken dignity were already taking root, a silent testament to a spirit they could not break. The Queen's silent defiance during this brutal hour-long ride foreshadowed a final astonishing display of courage that would stun both her executioners and the frenzied spectators. The crowd's mood was a volatile, shifting tide, swinging wildly between self-righteous satisfaction, venomous hatred, and morbid, insatiable curiosity. Some cheered with bloodthirsty glee, some spat their contempt, while others simply stared, their faces a blank canvas of morbid fascination. Every insult hurled, every mocking gesture was a deliberate attempt to utterly crush her spirit before the cold blade could do its work. Yet with each lurch of the wooden cart, each piercing scream from the rabid throng, Marie Antoinette remained a singular, impossibly composed figure. She was a woman who had lost every material possession, every vestige of outward power, yet clung fiercely to an inner core, a dignity that refused to be eroded. This agonizing procession through the very heart of Paris was intended to dehumanize her, to transform her into a mere symbol of the revolution's triumph over a despised royalty. Ironically, it also cemented her legend, etched not in gold, but in the quiet defiance, the unshakable dignity, and the profound motherly courage she displayed in her final, most public moments. By the time the cart finally reached the vast expanse of the Place de la Révolution, Marie Antoinette had survived an ordeal that would have shattered any ordinary person. But as the towering silhouette of the guillotine came into view, she knew the next stage of her humiliation awaited. A stage where she would confront not just death itself, but the ultimate test of her composure, her courage, and her very humanity. Her story, however, was far from over. That final act, the solitary walk up the wooden steps to the waiting blade, would reveal a side of her that even the most zealous revolutionaries could not destroy. It would unveil the Queen's capacity for grace, for defiance, and for a last, hauntingly human act that would echo through the annals of history. But on that chilling October day in 1793, the square was a boiling cauldron of raw rage, morbid curiosity, and savage bloodlust. In the very center of this maelstrom stood the guillotine, its stark wooden frame towering against the gray autumn sky, a silent, ominous predator waiting patiently for its prey. The crowd surged like a living, breathing tide, tens of thousands strong, hungry for spectacle, eager for the ultimate fall of the Queen who had come to embody everything they hated. Yet, as the cart jerked to a final abrupt stop, something utterly unexpected happened. Marie Antoinette, who had been systematically stripped of every luxury, every title, every shred of dignity, did not crumble. She stepped down from the cart with deliberate, almost ethereal composure. Observers who bore witness later described her as calm, even elegant, despite her grotesque predicament. Her hands were still bound tightly behind her back, the ropes digging into her flesh. Her hair, once a legendary crown of golden curls, had been crudely hacked off, leaving only a ragged stubble. Every insult hurled at her, every venomous jeer from the teeming crowd seemed to simply roll off her shoulders, leaving her untouched. The rough wooden steps leading up to the scaffold of the guillotine awaited her. It would have been easy, ordinary even, to collapse in a heap, to tremble uncontrollably, to scream out in terror. But she did not. She climbed those steps alone, refusing the executioner's outstretched hand, refusing this final, symbolic act of subjugation. Every single step she took was a silent, powerful defiance, a stark reminder that while they could end her life, they could never truly crush her spirit. And then, in a twist almost too surreal to fully believe, she stumbled, her foot accidentally landing squarely on the executioner's foot. Charles Henri Sanson, the very man who had severed her hair, bound her hands, and was now mere seconds away from taking her life, flinched visibly. The crowd's eyes, tense with horrifying anticipation, fell upon this tiny, unexpected moment. Marie Antoinette, without a single hint of fear or self-pity, whispered a quiet, utterly profound apology. "Forgive me, sir," she said softly, her voice carrying an unexpected grace. "I didn't mean to." That small, almost imperceptible act of human courtesy, mere seconds before her violent death, was extraordinary. It was deeply human. It was breathtakingly graceful. And it was defiant in the only way that truly mattered. She had retained her dignity, her essential self, when absolutely everything else had been stripped from her. The blade would take her life, but it could not, would not, sever her essence. At exactly 12 minutes past noon, it happened. The guillotine's blade fell, swift, precise, and utterly final. The assistant executioner then lifted her severed head aloft, holding it high for all to see, and the immense crowd erupted in a thunderous roar, chanting, "Long live the Republic!" The Queen's body was unceremoniously loaded onto a common cart and then dumped into an unmarked grave at a nearby cemetery. In death, her executioners had tried to reduce her to a common criminal, hoping to erase the last Queen of France as if she had never even existed. Yet, history, in its own mysterious way, always finds a means of preserving what cruelty desperately seeks to destroy. Even in death, Marie Antoinette's story refused to be silenced, to vanish into the anonymity they intended. One of the macabre tales that followed her final moments involved a young artist who would later become world-renowned as Madame Tussaud. She was summoned to make a death mask of the Queen's severed head, a chilling, tangible reminder of the complex fascination and horror that Marie Antoinette inspired, even in the moments immediately after her life had been violently extinguished. This grim artifact ensured her image, however grotesque, would endure. It would take more than 2 decades for Marie Antoinette's final chapter to be written, for her story to truly find its peace beyond the Revolution's bloody climax. After the monarchy's restoration in 1815, a new king, Louis XVIII, the brother of the executed Louis XVI, ordered a solemn exhumation. He sought to reclaim the remains of his brother and sister-in-law, to right the historical wrong of their ignominious burials. Their clothing, remarkably, was identified, clinging to their decomposed forms, a poignant link to their past. Their bodies were then given a proper, reverent royal burial in the majestic Basilica of Saint-Denis, the sacred, traditional resting place of French royalty for centuries. Finally, the Queen, who had been so publicly humiliated and executed as a commoner, was laid to rest with the dignity she had been so brutally denied in life. The French Revolution, born of radical ideals and fueled by furious resentment, had sought to utterly destroy a symbol of wealth, excess, and perceived tyranny. They had subjected Marie Antoinette to every conceivable indignity imaginable. Imprisonment, the wrenching loss of her children, a sham trial devoid of justice, profound public humiliation, and finally, a death designed to strip her of her very identity, to reduce her to nothing. They had wanted the world to see a monster, a debauched tyrant deserving of her gruesome fate. Instead, ironically, they revealed a woman of remarkable endurance, of unexpected courage, and of an almost ethereal grace in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Her last moments, far from being a collapse into terror, contained acts of subtle yet powerful defiance that history still remembers with awe. The quiet, unexpected apology to her executioner, the unwavering refusal to collapse under the weight of her fate, the serene composure on the cart as tens of thousands spat and jeered at her. All these were profound demonstrations that even in the face of ultimate, state-sanctioned cruelty, she could assert control over her own final narrative, over the very essence of her being. They could strip her of her crown, they could take her life, they could even crudely hack off her hair, tear off her royal clothing, and attempt to strip her of all dignity. But they could not erase the quiet strength, the fierce motherly courage, and the haunting poise she displayed until the very end. The guillotine may have been swift, brutal, and utterly public in its finality, but it could not sever her story from the indelible fabric of history itself. Accounts from countless witnesses, chilling sketches by revolutionary artists capturing her final moments, and later biographies meticulously pieced together
ensured that the final Queen of France would not simply vanish into obscurity, swallowed by the maelstrom of the Revolution. The image that remained, that resonated through the centuries, was not of a debauched, heartless monarch, but of a mother in agony, a prisoner facing injustice, and a human being confronting death with extraordinary, almost superhuman composure. Even centuries later, her story continues to captivate, to intrigue, and to inspire reflection. It is not only the raw brutality of the French Revolution that people remember when they think of Marie Antoinette, but precisely the way she faced it. Her dignity remained remarkably intact, her essential humanity preserved against all odds. The world witnessed her execution, her public humiliation, her systematic stripping of everything she held dear. Yet, paradoxically, they also witnessed a quiet rebellion, a stubborn, unyielding refusal to let hatred and fear define her ultimate final moments. That final apology, a small, almost imperceptible act of kindness and grace in the face of ultimate violence, became a powerful symbol. It declared, silently but eloquently, that they could take her life, but they could not destroy her spirit.
The enduring legend of Marie Antoinette isn't solely about royal excess or the tragic fall of a monarchy. More profoundly, it is about survival of the spirit, about grace under unimaginable pressure, and about the human spirit's stubborn, indomitable resilience in the face of dehumanization. Every cruel act, every calculated humiliation intended to diminish her, to break her, instead served only to highlight the inner strength that remained remarkably unbreakable. Even as the blade fell, her story refused to end with the revolution's violence, refused to be silenced by the cold steel. She was more than the sum of her misfortunes. She was a queen stripped bare, a mother grieving inconsolably for her child, a human being meeting death with a quiet, profound dignity that transcended her circumstances. In that, she left a legacy no guillotine, however swift or brutal, could ever erase. The last Queen of France died as they intended, publicly and brutally. But in the hearts and minds of the witnesses, and in the eternal annals of history, Marie Antoinette remained, defiantly untouchable. The attempt to erase Marie Antoinette from history, to reduce her to a mere footnote of a deposed monarchy, was a profound failure. The revolutionaries had hoped to cast her as a villain, a symbol of extravagance and tyranny, whose brutal end would be a cautionary tale. Instead, the sheer savagery of their methods, contrasted with her remarkable composure, etched her into the collective consciousness as a figure of enduring tragedy and quiet strength. The stories whispered by witnesses, the grim sketches made in the shadow of the guillotine, and the chilling death mask crafted by Madame Tussaud all served to preserve her image, not as a monster, but as a deeply human woman facing an inhumane end. Her legacy transcended the political aims of her executioners. Over centuries, her narrative has been retold, analyzed, and reinterpreted, revealing layers far beyond the simplistic propaganda. Historians and storytellers alike have grappled with the profound irony. The very spectacle intended to dehumanize her, to strip her of all royal mystique, inadvertently became the stage for her most powerful performance, a demonstration of unyielding inner dignity. The public humiliation meant to shatter her, instead forged an image of a stoic queen, a grieving mother, a woman who, when pushed to the absolute limit, found a profound wellspring within herself. The focus shifted from the opulent gowns and diamond necklaces of Versailles to the tattered white dress and the bound hands, from the Madame Deficit of revolutionary pamphlets to the composed figure on the scaffold. It was in these final, harrowing moments that Marie Antoinette truly defined herself, not through power or privilege, but through vulnerability and courage. The quiet rebellion of her last acts, the refusal to be helped up the steps, the almost imperceptible apology to Sanson, resonated because they were so unexpectedly human, so utterly at odds with the brutal, impersonal machinery of the revolution. They spoke to a profound refusal to surrender her essential self, even when her body and freedom were entirely forfeit. Her story became a timeless testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to find grace amidst degradation. It challenged the notion that cruelty could entirely extinguish personal dignity. For all the revolutionary success in dismantling the monarchy and executing its queen, they failed in their ultimate goal of erasing her essence. Instead, they inadvertently provided the backdrop for a narrative of extraordinary endurance, transforming a reviled monarch into a figure of tragic nobility. This transformation wasn't immediate or universal, but it was undeniable, growing steadily stronger through the generations. The enduring fascination with Marie Antoinette today is not merely about historical curiosity or the allure of royalty. It speaks to universal themes that resonate across time and culture. It is a story about how individuals confront overwhelming forces, how they maintain composure when all seems lost, and how they find strength even in the face of death. Her life, ending in such dramatic fashion, continues to provoke discussions about justice, power, and the complex relationship between a leader and their people. It asks us to look beyond simplistic labels and recognize the multifaceted humanity even in those history has sought to condemn. Ultimately, Marie Antoinette's death was not the end the revolutionaries intended. It was a catalyst for her legend, an unexpected genesis of a narrative that continues to captivate and challenge. Her final acts, born of necessity and inner fortitude, became iconic gestures that defied the very intentions of her oppressors. They stripped her of everything external, but they could not touch the core of her being, that spark of humanity that flickered brightest in her darkest hour. This is why, even centuries later, the name Marie Antoinette evokes not just the fall of a queen, but the triumph of an unbroken spirit. Her unwavering composure, her quiet courage, and her unforgettable apology serve as powerful reminders that dignity, once earned, cannot truly be stolen, only displayed. She passed from a world of unimaginable opulence to one of stark terror. Yet in that transition, she discovered and revealed an inner strength that became her most lasting legacy. She may have been the last queen of France, but through her final defiant moments, she secured an untouchable place in the eternal annals of human history. A queen whose ultimate crown was an unbroken spirit.